So hey guys, welcome to another Warframe video, and this one will be for the new players, okay? So if you've been playing the game for a while, this video is probably not for you, alright? Now, why am I making this video? Well, because I've seen a question in the comments over and over and over again, and the question basically is, how do you form a weapon? How do you decide that this weapon needs 4 Vs and 2 dashes? And why is it not 4 dashes and 2 Vs, or 5 Vs and 1 dash? And you know, I think a lot of people forget how bloody confusing Forma is when you first start playing the game. Especially since the game doesn't really explain it at all. It's pretty much just like, ooh, you have a Forma. Put one of these symbols into one of these fields. It doesn't matter that you're gonna put a D on a rifle. You will have Forma. Yay! And in this video, I will try and explain the way Forma should be put on either a weapon or a frame 95% of the time. Alright? So first things first, for weapons there are 3 types of polarity that you can choose, and the community refers to them as a V, D, and a dash. And for almost all weapons, the V polarity is the most important one, which is followed by the dash polarity. And finally we have a D, and this one is as close to useless as it can get on pretty much any weapon in the game. And the reason for this is that most mods that have a D polarity are close to useless with the exception of cryo rounds. Now, if you take a mod that has a V polarity and you put it into a slot that has a V polarity, it will reduce the cost of the mod by half. And this works the same for all the polarity types. So if you were to take a mod that has a D polarity and you put it into a slot that has a D polarity, it will once again reduce the cost by half. Now, rule number 1 when putting Forma on either a weapon or a frame is that you always Forma the most expensive mod first, and then you will work your way down the less expensive mods until you can put all the mods on either a weapon or a frame. So as an example, we have my Amprex, alright? And if I want to fit all these mods onto my Amprex, I'm gonna start off by adding a V for split chamber, since it's the most expensive mod that I have for the weapon. The next polarity will be yet another V for heavy caliber. The third polarity is once again a V, but this time for serration. And the fourth and final V is going to be for either point strike or vital sense, because they both take up 9 mod capacity. Now here comes a plot twist. So why did I add a dash instead of another V for vital sense? Well, I will talk about that in a little bit. For now though, we're just going to finish the build by adding high voltage and malignant force, which both need 7 mod capacity. And that's the build done. Now the reason why I added a dash instead of a V is because you can get primed rifle ammo mutation and you cannot get primed vital sense. And primed rifle ammo mutation takes up more mod capacity than vital sense. So we once again go by the logic of more expensive first, less expensive later. And this way I future-proof the weapon for when I finally get primed rifle ammo mutation. Now let's take a look at a rifle where we're gonna go by rule number 1, you know, most expensive first or less expensive later, but we're gonna make a very common exception because we want to use elemental combos on this weapon. So to fit all the mods onto the weapon, we're gonna start off with 1 V for split chamber, another V for heavy caliber, and third V for serration. Now since we want to use the elemental mods which take up 11 mod capacity, we're gonna add a dash for Stormbringer. Now the reason why we're adding a dash for Stormbringer and not Infected Clip or Hellfire or even D for cryo rounds is that Stormbringer is the base of all the strongest elemental combos. Basically each faction in the game has one elemental combo that's really good against it, and every single one of those combos needs Stormbringer. Now here comes the exception. We don't want to format the second slot for the elemental mod, even though it's right now the most expensive mod we can put onto the weapon. And that's because we want the weapon to be versatile. We want to use it against all the factions, so we will have to swap around Infected Clip, Hellfire and cryo rounds based on the faction we're going up against. And as you can see, Infected Clip and Hellfire have a dash polarity, while the cryo rounds mod has a D polarity. And when you take a mod that has a D polarity and you put it into a slot that has a V polarity or a dash polarity, it's going to take up more capacity than if you were to put it into an empty slot. Then we once again have a choice of point strike or vital sense, and then primed fast hands. And even though primed fast hands is cheap right now, once it's max it's going to be really expensive. And then finally we're going to add our vital sense mod, which is the least expensive one right now. And we're going to finish it off with one of the elemental combos. And this is the one we're going to swap out regularly. Okay, so for the infested and corrupted we're going to go with Infected Clip. For the Grenier, we're gonna go with Hellfire, and for the Corpus, we're gonna go with cryo rounds. And ta-da! We have a very standard crit build for the Toncore. Now for melee weapons, it's slightly different, so it's not the end of the world if your melee weapon comes with a D polarity, because there are some really good melee mods that have a D polarity. So you don't have to override it with another polarity. But the more important difference is stances. Each melee weapon comes with a stance slot and one or more stances that you can put into that slot. So the first thing you should always do when you get a new melee weapon is figure out which stance you like the most, because when you put a stance into the stance slot, it will increase the amount of mod capacity you have for that weapon. And based on whether or not the stance polarity matches the slot polarity, you're either gonna get double the mod capacity the stance offers, or you're gonna get less if the stance doesn't fit. So if the stance polarity doesn't fit the stance you like the most, the first Forma should change the polarity of the stance. Now, as you can see, there are two different types of polarity you can put on a melee weapon, and the community refers to them as a double dash and R. And both polarities are on stances, and double dash is also on some mods. Now, if you either don't care about which stance you're using on a melee weapon, or the stance polarity already matches your preferred stance and you still can't fit all the mods onto the weapon, you follow the same rules as with the normal weapon, so the more expensive mods first and the less expensive ones later. And there is once again the exception with elemental combos. Now for Warframes, there is a ton of really good mods that have a D polarity. So putting it onto a Warframe is not a bad idea. It is actually recommended because most of the defensive mods have a D. Now Warframes have a very similar system to the stance system on melee weapons, and that's auras. And when you put an aura into the aura slot, it will once again add to your mod capacity, and based on whether or not the aura fits the polarity, it will either add twice as much or less than it adds by default. Now there are more aura mods than there are stance mods, so you have a set of dash auras, set of V auras and set of D auras. So you should figure out which set of aura mods fits your Warframe the most, and if the aura polarity doesn't fit the set you want, it should be the first thing you change with Forma. Now once again, if you already have your preferred aura in the aura slot and it matches the polarity, and you still can't fit in all the mods, you follow the same rules as with weapons, so the most expensive mods first and the less expensive ones later. However, if you're sure that you're going to use one or more defensive mods like Vitality, Redirection, Steel Fiber, Vigor or Quick Thinking, put on a D instead. And this will allow you to change the build without changing the Forma. Because with Warframes, you're not going to use one build exclusively like you do with most of the weapons. So even though adding a D may not be as effective as adding another V or a dash, it is a safer way to Forma a Warframe. But only do this if you're sure you're going to use one or more of the defensive mods or another mod that uses a D polarity. And just by the way, the icons down here are auras, augments and Exilus mods. Now the last thing I should probably say is that if you're not sure if you want to use a certain mod, don't Forma it. Forma something else, even if it's less effective. Because it can and probably will bite you in the ass later on. And is that it? I hope that's it. So I thank you very much for watching once again. I hope the video was helpful, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.